now I have the honor of introducing a man who has made a tremendous impact on my life as well as on the lives of hundreds of thousands of others. And his name, as you know, is John Robbins. Yes. And we're going to give you the opportunity to appreciate him again, because I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about him. John is the author of Healthy at 100 and Diet for a New America, as well as other best-selling books. He's recognized as a leading expert on the dietary link between environment and health. He's the founder and board chair emeritus, I said it right, of EarthSave International, dedicated to healthy food choices, preservation of the environment, and a more compassionate world. Please help me welcome John Robbins.
Hi. How are you? Good morning. Good afternoon. Good day. Good moment, good breath, good eternity. How are you? Yeah, how are you feeling? Tell you what, I'd like to, popcorn style, just one at a time, randomly, pop out with one word that describes how you're feeling right now. Outstanding. Outstanding, fabulous, excellent.
Inspired.
What?
Inspired.
Inspired. Infired. Divine. This is a down group. I don't know. It's so depressed. What are we going to do? Been worse. All right. Okay. Well, maybe we can get our lights focused together, our minds focused together in a way that, it's in that rapport that we get together, that resonance, that something happens. When you're really engaged with another person or a project or a creative act, and your passion is flowing and you're lit up from within in the endeavor, in the service, in the contribution of it, that sometimes is what raises us to our next level of potential and our next level of being and the level of understanding that is needed to deal with what is in front of us. And we're living in a very unique time. This really is unprecedented. I know every generation thinks that their time is unprecedented and unlike any other. But today we have more evidence for that than ever in any other time because of the level of collision that's taking place between the conventional Western lifestyle on one hand and the planetary limits on the other. The ability of the atmosphere to absorb in a healthy way our excretions, the gases that we emit through our activities. The ability of the oceans to survive our pollution and also our level of overfishing. The coral reefs to survive what we're doing to them. There's so many, the rainforest's ability to survive, the level of deforestation that we're doing. There are so many ways that we're right up against an edge. And sometimes there's people say, well, it's okay so far. But not really. Not really. And not if you look at all the people who are suffering and the animals that are suffering and the ecosystems that are deteriorating under the impact of human activities that are normal. It's not that some bad actor is polluting, breaking the law, and that's causing the problem. There is some of that, but it's the standard operating procedure of our culture. It's legal what's happening, most of it, and that is doing the damage. It's legal, it's normal, it's paid for, it's rewarded. Some of the people doing the most damage are amongst the most wealthy because they're compensated for the activities that are undermining the ability of life on Earth to continue to sustain humanity and many other species. I mean, the level of species extinction that is occurring right now is quite possibly the fastest in the history of the Earth. And what does it mean to be a human being in these times, working to heal ourselves and be part of the healing of the greater good? And how do we both deal with the pain that's around us and inside us and the glory at the same time? Because they're both there. The wound and the beauty. They're both there. And it's a time of great wounding, and it's a time of great healing and beauty at the same time. And there's people who say, well, we're not going to make it. The momentum already established behind the greenhouse gases, behind so many of the flaws and problems, they're so established, they're so rewarded, they're so intractable that they can't be turned around. And so people are going numb, people are becoming cynical, people are feeling defeated and depressed, people are compensating right, left, and center with addictive behaviors because they don't know how to be alive and present with the pain in a way that brings them closer to themselves, closer to the heart of life. And we see that around us. I mean, I don't know if you have young people in your life who are growing up, but the levels of drug addiction and other forms of addiction, too, that are taking place. And it's understandable. I mean, people want to feel good. They can't stand how they feel. They don't feel worthy, helpful, guided, inspired, valuable, positive, healthy, clear. They feel something very different than that. And so we want those good feelings that you shared a moment ago. We want to have those feelings, and we want them to spread. We want them to be as contagious as pathogens can be, more contagious, because they can light up the next and the next. That's the game, the pay it forward. That's how we release ourselves. That's how we surrender. That's how we find out who we really are. So that's my philosophy. And did we get some questions on cards? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. There's a few here. One says, how do I react to someone who is hurtful to me? Thank you. How do you react? I don't know how you do. I think you mean how might you. But the first thing is to know how you do react. What goes on in you? You know, what is your pattern of taking it personally, of making it worse? Someone sticks a dagger in you, you could just take it out. You know, or you could complain about it being there. You know, you could go around wanting that person to take it out. And so they don't do that. So you're just suffering for a long time, wanting them to see what they've done. And maybe they won't ever see how badly they've hurt you or are hurting you. Maybe they're not capable of that or ready for that. Maybe they are. But what you need to do is take care of yourself. So that if you got a knife, take the knife out. Take care of the wound. You know, any energy that you have invested in making someone else feel guilty for how they've harmed you is going to bring you down. It's going to suck your energy. It's going to undermine your relationship with them, the possibility of any kind of healing there. And that's your responsibility. So in your wellness, you have a lot more strength to communicate. Now, if a person isn't going to listen and you try to communicate respectfully and you try repeatedly, depending on the importance of the relationship, of course, how much you try and how much you invest in that. But if you continue to say your truth and you do it as cleanly and clearly and self-responsibly as possible and they still don't get it, they still continue the behavior that's hurting you, then you need to take some distance. And that's okay. That could be a respectful distance. You know, and if you're unwilling to do that, then you have to look at your attachment that's holding you into something that's not good for you. It's the same thing with food habits that aren't good for you. It's the same thing with all kinds of patterns that we can get into, relationships with people or otherwise, where it's not good for us. We do get into those things. Every one of us. And that's how we learn. Oops. Oops. Great word, oops. I like it a lot. Oops. Another word I like is ouch. 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 What did I just do to myself? What thoughts was I just having? What action did I just take? Ouch. Okay, so it hurt. Don't become a grouch. Don't stay connected to it. Just move on. That's what I do anyway. So that was how do I react to someone who's hurtful to me? What do you eat? Can you talk about your new book? I eat food. Not too much. Mostly plants. That's Michael Pollan's little 7-word thing. And I think it's if you had to do it in 7 words, I think that's pretty good. But by food, I don't mean necessarily what some people mean by food. Because what some people mean by food is, I would call junk. It's so adulterated, it's so refined, it's so processed, it's so far from what nature intended that I don't really know if it's food anymore. It's not food for health. And so I don't eat that. I eat a very simple diet. I eat a lot of raw foods, but not totally. I have done at times completely raw, mostly in the summers. We used to live in Canada, and we tried it up there. It didn't feel right. It was too cold for that. But I eat an essentially vegan diet. I eat very, very little animal products, and any that I do are never from factory farms. That's just bottom line for me, under any circumstances, because I've seen the level of suffering there, the misery. I don't want that on my menu. I don't want that in my body. I don't want to support with my food dollars the industries that do that. So that's ethical to me. Not too much. I really do think that our culture has taken on most people are overweight. I mean, what the norm in the culture is overweight is what I mean. So, and I feel better leaner. I do. So I don't like to get overeat because I don't feel as good. Maybe I overdo other things, but that's not one of them for me. So, my new book is called The New Good Life. You know what the old good life was? Shop till the planet drops. The old good life is this trance that we've been brought up with, brought up to believe that the more money we have, the bigger house, the bigger car, the fancier car, the more opulent our lifestyle, the more showy, the more prestigious our address, that's the goal. And one of the sadnesses is that when you see people making that the goal, then even if they get a great deal of money, there's always somebody with more. So then the 30,000 square foot house is not as big as the next door neighbor's 45,000. So they want, or that they've got 3 yachts, so I've got to get, it's endless. And when you think what that money could be doing, if instead it was used to support the people who don't have enough. One of the, to me, most egregious realities of our time is the extent to which the wealth of our nation has become concentrated in the hands of the few. The wealth gap, the wealth inequality gap, is today greater than it has ever been in the history of the United States, greater than it was in 1929. That is to say, the percentage of the wealth that is controlled by the top 100th of 1%, the richest 101%, is greater than ever in the history of the United States. And that's saying something, because that goes way back before Roosevelt. And we've undone all of that, and we've created a winner-take-all society, every man and woman for him or herself society. That, I think there is in each of us a little bit of Mother Teresa, a little bit, and a little bit of Donald Trump. But the Donald Trump part gets all the press. That part gets rewarded financially, it gets ego gratification, it gets a great deal of energetic reflection in our culture, so that he can become a celebrity. Mr. Trump can. And he really, what does he got? You know, I mean, he inherited a great deal of money, most of which he's lost. And he's flamboyant, and he certainly is materialistic, and he's certainly got an ego that is prodigious. But other than that, I don't know really what he has to contribute. But that part of us gets heralded, gets magnified in the culture. So we have to work to soften around that and to honor that part of us that's compassionate and kind and connected and caring. If you think about the careers in which the people manifest those kinds of qualities, teachers, nurses, people who take care of the elderly, people who take care of the little children, it's mothers in general. These are the least rewarded financially and often the least status rewarded in our society. You know, if you've been a mother and at home and not working, you're working obviously, but you're not working in the, you're not getting paid for it, exactly. And then you go back to work as if you hadn't been, but you know, it's your resume. They don't want to see your years spent, what you learned, what you gave as a mother. That doesn't count usually. They want unencumbered workers. That's to say, and what mother is unencumbered? So, and I actually feel this is an important thing because men, we have to speak out for this because the mothers are too tired because they're raising the kids for the most part. I mean, men are involved more and more. That's good, but the traditional thing. And particularly single mothers, because they don't, economically, they get such a short end of the stick here. It's terrible. So I'm rambling a little bit, but what the issue of wealth and how it's distributed and where it goes is real important. And in the old good life, it just goes, it gravitates to the top. And I want it to see a way of living and us to create together a way of life that is thriving across the board, that is prosperous across the board. I don't care that we have the greatest number of billionaires in this country, of any country in the world. We do. And out of that, people will say it's the richest country in the world. But what about the fact that we also have the greatest number of homeless of any fully industrialized country, the greatest number of people in prison, the highest infant mortality rate, the highest rate of children in poverty? Those are all facts. And that's not the richest country in the world. That's the poorest that would do that. So we have got our values really askew, and the new good life is about straightening that out so we can live with respect for ourselves and each other. Can you speak about happiness, love, and spirit relative to health through vegan food? Blessings. Happiness, love, and spirit relative to health through vegan food. I think that says it. Yes, I think that says it very well. Happiness, love, and spirit relative to health through vegan food. When you're healthy, you feel better. It's easier to be happy. It's easier to overflow. I'm not saying you can't do it when you're not feeling well, by any means. But when your body is a vehicle for your living spirit, when it's radiant, when it feels most alive, and there's the most joy and as the words were, happiness, love, and spirit, flowing through your body and your mind and your heart, your emotional body, you connect then to your higher purpose more easily. It's not the only way to do it. People who are sick can do it. It's easier when you're well. And you have more energy then for the work that you want to take on. So I want each of you to be healthy. I want you to be as healthy as you can be. I want you to have as much energy as possible. I want you to have as much stamina as possible so you can stay with the projects you undertake, so that your service and your work can succeed. Whatever your form of activism is, maybe it's just one-to-one with people, maybe you're taking on causes, whatever it is, I want you to succeed in it. I want you to have the wisdom, the creativity, the intelligence, the thoughtfulness, and the patience, and all the other qualities it takes. And it really helps to be healthy. And it really helps to be light in your vibration. Because otherwise you just are too heavy you get stuck when you're heavier. So, any other questions? I mean, are those the cards that, yes? Yes. The question has to do with soy products and the vegan diet, and she has heard that the majority of soy products today are genetically modified. Yes, that's true. 80% of the U.S. soy crop is modified in a particular way, genetically engineered to be Roundup Ready is the name of the seed. It's made by Monsanto. They've pretty well cornered the market. And what these seeds do is they produce a soybean plant that will withstand Roundup. Roundup is an herbicide. And when it's sprayed on green leaves, it disrupts the ability of the leaves to do photosynthesis. So it kills the plant. But they have genetically engineered a number of crops, including wheat now, and canola, and corn, and cotton, and soy, to be impervious, virtually, to Roundup. So what they can do is they plant the seeds, and then they fly over and spray Roundup on it. It kills all the weeds, but it doesn't kill the Roundup-ready soybeans. Organically grown soybeans are not genetically engineered at this point. There is a big effort in Washington, headed by a guy named Michael Taylor, who used to be Vice President of Communications at Monsanto and is now working in the Department of Agriculture, to allow biotech, it's the polite name for genetically engineered foods, to be considered organic. And the Organic Consumers Association, OCA, run by Ronnie Cummins and others, great group, is mobilizing to prevent that, because they're speaking on behalf of organic consumers, the Organic Consumers Association. There's also something called the Organic Trade Association, the OTA. They pretend to speak, they try to speak in Washington for the organic movement, but they are vendors, they are businesses that sell organic food. And some of them, the biggest ones, and therefore have the most clout, would like to expand the definition in all kinds of ways, to include sewage sludge, to include genetically engineered seeds, because that way they can bring their prices down, and still call it organic. They find some of the limitations of the organic methods to be restrictive. They don't have the real feel of it. The Organic Trade Association represents the corporate takeover, or attempt to take over the term organic in the United States. The OCA, Organic Consumers Association, is fighting against that. But at the present time, if you get a soy product that is that is not organic, it is almost certainly genetically engineered. If you get a soy product that is organic, it is certainly not genetically engineered. And that is the only way you can really know right now. Yes?
Well, excuse me, I've understood recently that even if it's soy, even if it's organic, that they have coated it or drenched it in a petroleum product to keep it alive, keep it clean up longer. For instance, like silk, many organic stores are taking silk out of it because they are using petroleum products in the production of soy milk.
Oh, you don't mean silk like from the cloth. You mean the silk brand. Right. Yeah, the silk brand was bought by a very large dairy few years ago, and I don't really know what they're doing anymore. It's a shame. A lot of times what happens is these companies start out and they build a name for themselves and they grow. They've got real principles, and that's why they grow, because people relate to that, want that, and then they get bought by a bigger one. Tom's of Maine was just bought by Colgate recently. And Colgate is saying, no, we're not going to touch a thing. But everybody knows in time, they won't touch it too much the first year. But it's happened to so many, many companies. It's amazing. Celestial Seasonings is an interesting one. You know, the herb tea company? Yeah, they grew, and I forget the guy's name, but his company grew it beautifully, sold it for a lot of money to one of these big corporations. It tanked. They did this stuff to it. The company lost a lot of money, became worth a lot less. He bought it back and brought it up to again. But that's a nice story. But, it's just an uphill battle for a lot of companies to stay in when the giants go after them. We're seeing a lot taking place at Whole Foods right now. There's just battles going on. It's like the battle between good and evil, almost. It's certainly the battle between humanity and automaticity. Okay. What is happening with Whole Foods? A lot of different things. The most recent flap is that John Mackey, the CEO, wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal about the healthcare proposals that was it's very consistent with his views, very intelligently. I don't agree with him, but it's an intelligent statement. I know him quite well, actually. I consult for Whole Foods, and I like John Mackey. He's a libertarian. He's a vegan. He's brilliant. He's unusual. But he's got issues because Whole Foods is a very big company right now. And the board is composed of a lot of business types who really couldn't care less about organic food or health food or anything like that. They would make it just another Safeway because they think that would be the most profitable thing with a veneer of health or organic. Whereas he is holding the line, trying in his way to have more organic foods, more locally grown foods, more less packaging. He's working real hard to get all their packaging fully recyclable. And even on the healthcare situation where he's taken such an unpopular stand amongst many people in the company, and I happen to be involved with this piece of it, he's got a very unique program which would permit his employees, a lot of employees, big company, to go to either one of Dean Ornish's live-in programs or one of Joel Furman's or one of Caldwell Esselstyn's, or one of John McDougall's. And the company would pay for this. Yeah. And he thinks that it would be fabulous. He wants enough of the employees to do it that they can then say, okay, here's the employees that did these programs, and here were their health care costs down the line as a result after that. Here's our other half of our employees, or two-thirds, whatever the breakdown, and they didn't do these programs. Here's their health care costs down the line. He thinks it's going to show that the company made money out of giving this to their employees because of what it saved them. And if he's right about that, and then he wants to take it to the customers. He wants to take this to the customers. And he thinks big, and he thinks outside the box. We'll see how it goes. It's a step at a time. But I'm on the board that's overseeing these things, and it's for real. And he has to fight his board of directors to do these things, by the way, because not every business mind can immediately grasp the potential here. So, but he's in there slugging away. He's a good guy. Yes?
I'm just wondering what you think of companies like Walmart and Safeway branding their own organics. In the end, that's a good thing or not?
It's both. She's asking, what do I think about Walmart and Safeway having their own organics sections and brands and stuff, yeah? Well, big organic, there are some suppliers doing organics now, and These are the OTA people. They want to do everything they can to water it down. And if it doesn't say anything in the organic standards about labor relations, then they don't feel any obligation to treat their people well. If it doesn't, it's the letter of the law rather than the spirit of organics that they're adhering to. And sometimes it's barely better than the other stuff. And I guess it's inevitable in our economy that this would happen. There are many people in the organics industry who see this as a dilution to the point of compromise and of loss, and they want to have another standard that's a higher standard that would include the way the people are treated, and it would include, and if they slip in genetically engineered foods into the organic, then that wouldn't be in this other label, and that may happen that we get another label. In time, Walmart will probably co-opt that, but it's an exciting time to be alive. Yes.
I wasn't familiar with some of those things you were talking about, the organizations that the Whole Foods guy was wanting his people to go to.
Oh, you're not familiar with the people I mentioned whose clinics he wanted. Yeah. Well, Joel Furman, I mentioned, Dean Ornish, Caldwell Esselstyn, and John McDougall. Well, Dean Ornish is a world-renowned cardiologist and specialist in preventive medicine who's published peer-reviewed studies up the kazoo that document that when people with sometimes very, very end-stage heart disease take his residential programs in which the diet is very low-fat, virtually vegan, in some cases totally vegan, diet, but there's also exercise appropriate to their fitness level, and emotional sharing, group work, so people don't feel so alone with their issues, and stress release. He doesn't use the word meditation because it's a little, has some connotations, but that's what it is. Guided visualizations, relaxation techniques that focus the mind and quiet the mind, and his results from people who take these programs are phenomenal, just phenomenal. The other three are people who specialize in various forms of vegan diets that they have clinics, people come to them, they get amazing results. What? Low-fat vegan. Yeah, Caldwell Esselstyn's is very, very low-fat. Dean's is very low-fat. McDougall's is very low-fat. And Joel Furman's is not so low-fat. He allows more nuts, avocados, things like that. But, these are fine lines. These are little fine lines. And compared to the difference between the standard American diet. Yes, in the back?
Is he aware of Douglas Graham or 80-10-10 ways? Is the Whole Foods president, is he aware of 80-10-10 types of diets?
Is John Mackey aware of 80-10-10 diets? Not much, I don't think. No.
Well, Doug Graham is 80-10-10, and so is McDougall. It's basically they're 80-10-10, except for the one you mentioned that doesn't have some seeds.
You just don't do raw.
Well, they don't use those numbers.
Well, they do use those numbers in their lectures. They say not more than 10% fat.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, back to organic food. How do you feel about, right now, most organic food produced in the United States is using byproducts from the animal slaughterhouses like bone meal and blood meal versus veganic gardening, which I think should be the future for really true organics.
Yeah, you're right about that. There's a lot of use of slaughterhouse byproducts in organic agriculture. And it's interesting, it's a different manure because of what those animals have been fed, what Howard was talking about last night. And it smells differently, too.
And the blood and the bones.
Yeah, the blood particularly is carrying all kinds of pathogens. And, are those broken down in the soil? Do the plants possibly carry any of that is a big question. But it's certainly what's done in big organics in particular. Smaller scale organic farms tend not to do this. They tend to use local supplies. They use what's called green manure, which is really not manure at all. It's growing cover crops, generally nitrogen-fixing plants that enrich the soil. You dig it under and make the soil richer. That's the natural way to do it. But in order to do that, you have to let a part of your land go into cover crop every few years. And so if you're trying to squeeze every last drop of product out of your land, you don't do that. You put in the petroleum-based fertilizers if you're doing it synthetically, or if you're doing it organic, you do massive amounts of manure and stuff. But this truly sustainable agriculture doesn't look upon land as a resource to extract as much from as possible. It's just not the mentality. It looks upon land and feels a stewardship, feels a responsibility for now and the future and the future. The Iroquois used to talk about 7 generations, which meant that in their deliberations, when there was an issue at hand that was serious and contentious and required a council of elders and wise folk from the people to think about it, they would bring in the concept of how will various decisions and choices that we might make affect 7 generations from now. And in that, you could see their commitment to the legacy, the long-term legacy of their impact on the planet and on their culture and on others. So if you go to war with a neighboring tribe, you might win that war. Maybe you have the capacity, you got more bows and arrows or more nuclear weapons or whatever. But so in the very short-term thinking of a certain mindset, oh, we'll win. We'll control those resources. We'll own Iraq's oil, whatever it is. But what is the longer-term consequences of that violence? Because it perseveres in certain ways. And then there's always the rebound. There's always the revenge. An eye for an eye, Gandhi said, makes the whole world blind. It just goes on. So each of us has a chance to say the buck stops here. However badly we've been treated, the first person was speaking about that, however much violence we have received, however much disrespect we have experienced, we have the opportunity to turn that around and say, what was done to me is not what I'm going to do to others. Freedom is what you do, Sartre said, with what's done to you. Freedom is not being exempt or immune from what others might do to you. Yes?
Hi. I have a question about what we can do as being part of this fabulous, what I call movement, raw food or veganism or just eating healthy and being more aware of how our actions are reactions for the planet. How can we move forward and more than just doing so for our lives, making a real difference? And I mean like in Washington, where we have powerful lobbyists like Monsanto, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, how do we fight against that power to really try and move the country more into, what we know is better?
Well,
The second part of
yes.
what are you doing that you are excited about in the near future?
Well, the first question she asked had to do with how do we be effective against the bigger forces that are alliant in destructive ways, basically. And, you have to listen inside yourself to where you're called. There's so many problems. There's so many issues. There's so much suffering. There's so many things wrong. You can't deal with it all. You've got to focus. Now, it's not that this place should be focused and not that. It's you need to focus where you're called to focus. You have to listen. You have to watch your responses. What brings you alive? Where do you feel committed? Maybe it's working with children who've been harmed. Maybe it's working with women who are suffering and harmed. Maybe it's working with addicts. Maybe it's taking on causes and in Washington and trying to alter legislation, affect legislation. Maybe you're going to run for. Maybe one of you is going to be president. at some point. It could be. I mean, think about if young Barack was here. Who would have thought? Who would have even given him a chance in a million? You know, a black man? You know, God bless him. And so, I don't know what's possible. But I do know that we won't learn what's possible unless we release our ideas, our limiting ideas of what's possible. And that's when we start to get bigger than the boxes, the stereotyped self-identities and self-images that we've imprisoned ourselves in and allowed ourselves to take on. And that's when our identity shifts from the little me, the one who's victimized, the one who's hurting, the one who's got to get up in the morning, to who we really are, who's really glad to get up in the morning, no matter how much your body hurts. Because it's another chance to sense, to feel, to love, to care, to learn, to grow, to rejoice, to teach, to learn, to expand, to live. And I think that this is what it's about, living. Living as well, as deeply as you can, as honestly with yourself as you can be. And then you do something. Don?
John, I wanted to make sure everyone knew you wrote a tremendous book called Healthy at 100. And the woman's question over here about organic agriculture reminded me that in that book you told the story of the hundreds of people and some of the longer people that remineralize their soil with rock powder. And I was wondering if you feel like I'm pestering you to comment on the option we have of also remineralizing the soil like the hundreds of people do and other people, and apparently produce much healthier and long-lived human lifespan.
Well, I'm getting two signs. One that says repeat the question, and the other says that I have 1 minute. So it would take me 1 minute to repeat the question. So
2.5, 3 minutes.
Okay. So the question in a nutshell was about remineralizing the soil, which Don's been involved with for decades. It's what the ice ages would do. As the glaciers would come across, they would grind up mountains, grind up rocks, enormous amounts of granite under their weight, and then when they would recede, all that would be fertilizer. It's full of minerals. And rock dust is one of the best sources of potassium, actually, and other minerals, a lot of great minerals for the soil and for our plants. It's slow release, though, compared to chemical fertilizers, which inject. Plants don't even have a choice when their roots touch the stuff. It just goes right in. Whereas the plants have an intelligence. It's an amazing thing about a plant. If there's water 2 feet down and 3 feet to the right, but it's dry, the soil is dry in between, the plant's roots go down to get it. Now, how did they know? That's where it was. It's not known how they know, but they don't. They do it. And they also know where the minerals are that they need. And the other nutrients are that they need. They sense them, and they get them. But they only take in what they need. But we burn our plants with infusions of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium, and we don't give them the rest of the minerals. So they're out of balance, they're out of phase with life. They're not even expressing their own natures very fully. They're sad. They might be really brightly colored. They might be like the tomatoes that are really red and bright, but were picked, but they're hard as rocks, because they've been bred for that. There's a whole lot of ways that we have to find ourselves back to the earth and its ways. And there's intelligences in us that will enable us to do it, just as there are in the plants that enable them to find the minerals. We just have to really listen for that intelligence. So I know that I have to finish up, so I won't take another question, but I'll talk to you afterwards for a few minutes if you want to come up. But I would like to finish by asking you a question, if I may, which is, why are you here? Why have you come to this conference? And also, why are you here on Earth? You know? Do you ever think about that? And I think that it's a very personal question. It's a very intimate question. It's not a question that anyone else can answer for you. Though maybe other people, you can see in their lives or the way they express themselves, a piece of it, a reflection of a piece of yourself. But to know why you're here, and to know that it's not to please anybody else, it has nothing to do with anybody else's expectations for you or agenda for you, the role they would like you to play in their movie. You can play any role you want in anybody else's movie, but the question of why you're here is yours, your gift. You know, may you open it every morning, every day of your life with joy. Thank you.